Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into a topic that might sound technical, but trust me, it is about to completely reshape the balance of power in India. We're talking about redrawing the country's entire political map. And this is an issue so charged, it could redefine the influence of every single state. All right, let's get right into it.
So what this all boils down to is a fundamental conflict over what fair representation really means in a country as incredibly diverse as India.
And yeah, that brings us to the biggest question of all. How can a process that's literally designed to make democracy more fair end up threatening to create a massive political divide? It seems like a contradiction, right? Well, let's unpack it. Okay, take a look at this, because this chart gets right to the heart of the whole controversy. If we were to reallocate parliament seats based on today's population, you'd see northern states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar get a huge surge in their number of representatives. At the same time, southern states, which ironically have been more successful at controlling population growth, would see their influence shrink. This potential power shift, well, it's the political earthquake that everyone is bracing for.
So, now that you see just how high the stakes are, let's just rewind for a second and really understand the principle at play here. What exactly is delimitation, and what's it even supposed to do?
So what is this thing? Well, think of it this way. Electoral maps aren't set in stone. I mean, people are born, they move, populations shift, some areas get more crowded, others thin out. Delimitation is basically a crucial democratic health check that redraws those maps to make sure they still reflect where people actually live. And the big democratic ideal behind all of this is super important. It's all about making sure that every single vote carries roughly the same weight, no matter where in the country you happen to live. It's about that core principle: one person, one vote, one value. And here's a really simple way to picture why that matters so much. Imagine two different constituencies. In constituency A, you've only got 1,000 voters, so your one vote has a much bigger impact on the final result. But over in constituency B, with 10,000 voters, the value of your single vote gets pretty diluted. Delimitation tries to stop this from happening by making sure constituencies all have roughly the same number of people.
So, this Delimitation Commission is handed a massive mission, and it really breaks down into three key jobs. First, and this is the big one we've been talking about, it decides how many Lok Sabha seats each state gets. Second, it gets out the map and draws the actual boundary lines for every single constituency within a state. And third, it marks out which of those seats are reserved for scheduled caste AS and tribes, which is absolutely vital for ensuring their representation.
Okay, but this is where a routine democratic process turns into a brewing political crisis. It's all because of a huge demographic split in the country. Really, it's a tale of two Indias. And here's the crazy irony at the center of it all. For decades, the national policy was to encourage population control. Now, the southern states were, by and large, really successful at this. This was partly due to things like higher female literacy and better health care. But under a strict one-person, one-vote model, their success now means they get politically penalized. They stand to lose seats and influence to the more populous northern states. So, to deal with this growing problem, a pretty drastic step was taken way back in 1976. The Constitution was actually amended to freeze the number of seats for each state based on the 1971 census. Now, this was supposed to be temporary, but the problem didn't just go away. So, in 2001, they hit the pause button again and extended the freeze. And that second extension, well, it's now set to expire after 2026. Now, this is a really important detail. The freeze only applied to the total number of seats each state gets in the Lok Sabha. It didn't stop the redrawing of boundaries inside those states. In fact, a commission back in 2002 did just that. It readjusted the constituency lines within each state to balance out population shifts, but it kept each state's total seat count exactly the same as it was in 1971.
So that brings us to the group at the center of this whole storm, the Delimitation Commission. Who are these people? And just how much power do they actually have?
Well, the commission is a really high-powered three-member body. You've got a current or former Supreme Court judge as the chairperson, plus India's chief election commissioner and the state election commissioner for whichever state they're working on. So this whole setup is designed to make sure it's independent and has serious authority. And believe me, its authority is immense. The orders from the Delimitation Commission have the force of law. They're just as powerful as an act of parliament. And for most of its history, whatever the commission decided, that was it. Final. You couldn't challenge or question it in any court.
But that all changed very, very recently. In a landmark ruling in August 2024, the Supreme Court said that actually a constitutional court can review the Commission's orders. But, and this is a big but, only on very specific grounds, like if an order is found to be manifestly arbitrary. So this introduces a new and pretty limited check on the Commission's otherwise sweeping power.
So all of this, the history, the politics, the demographics, it all brings us to right now. There is a constitutional clock, and it is ticking, loudly. So what happens next?
The number to remember here is 2026, because after the very first census that's completed after that year, the constitutional freeze on reallocating Lok Sabha seats finally expires. This half-century pause is just about over.
And you can't do any of this without fresh data, right? Well, the data is on its way. A new national census is already in the works, and it's expected to be wrapped up by 2027. This is what will give us the first updated population numbers since the freeze even began. And as if the stakes weren't high enough, there's another major reform that's completely tied to this, the landmark Women's Reservation Bill, which is meant to reserve 1/3 of seats for women in Parliament. Well, it can only be implemented after this whole delimitation process is complete. So the futures of two massive democratic reforms are now constitutionally locked together.
Which leaves us with this fundamental, frankly massive dilemma facing India. There are no easy answers here. How does the world's largest democracy balance that core principle of representation by population without effectively penalizing the very states that have made real progress on key national goals? The search for that answer is going to define the next chapter of Indian politics.